Hello, hello. It was a little problem of connection. Well, friends, I'm actually in Lithuanian biggest woods called Labanoras, and I was reading in different diaries of our guerrilla warriors, our partisani, that then it was called America because those woods are so big. It was maybe easier to hide from occupants. So and I just read another book of Lev Dobransky about the captive nations. And what I found out that it was a debate in 52 to liberate those territories or just contain Russia. And this appeasement policy actually won. Let's just contain Russia. Let's create wonderful NATO. And let's, forget those Lithuanians, Ukrainians. Well, you didn't forget us, of course, but you didn't liberate us. So why I'm telling it from so far, when I was working in America, I had my own fight with reset with Russia that Obama administration was doing. But honestly, every American president was doing this kind of reset of relations with empire of Moscow and appeasing Moscow. And all those attempts led to body counts in our region, to territories lost, and long years of occupation. The only president, Reagan, that you, of course, know, your own former governor, made it great. He embraced our freedom, and that's why we are alive. So what can I say today, remembering my last visit to LA with Baltic Musketeers? Then I was criticizing Biden administration that they were not good enough to push for NATO membership of Ukraine, though we were so close in Vilnius. We were so close to defeat Russians on Ukrainian frontiers, but for some reason, Biden administration, Jake Sullivan, was not ready to win. They contained themselves, and that was another kind of appeasement. But friends, today we have the same and much worse. We had American administration 100% following the Russian lines, like dropping all. Well, Trump was accusing Zelensky for not having cards, but to be honest, Trump administration threw all the cards before even negotiations started. They gave up NATO membership. That's, you have no right to give it up, because actually this is written in NATO treaty. Every nation has a right to join NATO. If we as NATO members agree on that, this is not only American decision. This is decision of all the nations. And today, it's only America against. Well, I don't count Hungary and other Russian puppets. We could actually deal with them. But today, even Berlin is with us on that angle. I'm just back from EPP Congress in Valencia. We met Merz. We met Chancellor Merz. And he is for Ukrainian membership in NATO. He is with us much more than American administration today. So we are all united. And while American administration is again starting to appease Russians, I didn't even talk about Ukrainian territories that it seems this nice real estate builder from New York is ready to give, though he has no right to give any territory to Russians. The problem is that, while you are appeasing Russians there, we as Europeans, we are becoming Americans. When Merz was speaking to us, you know what I thought? This is what Reagan would say in those years when he said those great speeches of how to defeat evil empire, or, you have to tear this wall down. Well, we are becoming Americans while you are taking the Russian tunes. Well, of course, we will not agree with that. Of course, we will never betray Ukrainians. Of course, we will fight till the end, because I don't want those woods of Labanoras to become again the battleground. We are ready. We are preparing. We will fight with Russians like Ukrainians fight. But you Americans, stay Americans. You Americans, listen to what your greatest President Reagan was always saying. Appeasement always leads to defeat. Appeasement provokes aggression. Isolationism will make American soldiers die in the future, because you are opening all the doors for your enemies to enter and destroy the free world we created. We revolted. We were the first in the Soviet Union to revolt because of American dream, because we believe that. Ukrainians are fighting for American dream. So you do not abandon American dream, please. You stay Americans. And until you wake up, we will be Americans, and we will fight for American values on Eastern front lines. Thank you, friends.
Thank you, Julia.
I'm not seeing Rima. Oh, there. I'm seeing Rima now.
I'm here.
And I'm missing
Okay.
Sasha. There. I'm seeing Rima now. And there's Sasha.
Hey, Sasha. Hey, Rima.
Hey.
The rest of y'all, good to meet you for the first time, but good to see
Hey,
old
Doug.
friends too. Hey,
Yeah.
Sasha.
Welcome. We're gonna hear you live, and I'll just be in the backstage. Okay.
All right. First, I want to thank Žygis for his very passionate speech and plea. We agree with him 100%, and we hope to follow in what he has advised. I'd like you to meet my panel. We're going to be discussing Ukraine today. First, Sasha Ustinova, who is she is the member of parliament of Ukraine for the faction of the Holos political party. She's the chairwoman of the Parliamentary Temporary Special Commission on arms control and the advisor to the Minister of Defense of Ukraine. I've met Sasha here very briefly in Chicago at an event that was going on here. She's one of the people I admire and follow the most. So welcome, Sasha, to the panel. Next, we have Taras Kuzio. And if I cut you off and you're ready to say something, please yell at me. Taras Kuzio, who is let me just pull this up real quick so I don't make any mistakes. He's professor at the National University of Kyiv-Mohyla Academy. He has written books on Russian imperialism and the Russian-Ukraine war. So he is with us, and I follow him as well on Twitter, so I know that he's equally passionate and articulate about the situation, the war in Ukraine. Next, J.P. Lindsley, who is a journalist. I know him. He's from he's not from Chicago. He was on WGN and was reporting daily from Ukraine until that stopped. But he continues to do the work of a journalist reporting from Ukraine, and also taking our administration to task for some of the things that are happening. So we'll be happy to hear from him as well. And lastly, we have Rima Žygimantas. She is a political science and international relations major, graduated and worked in that area for a bit, and left for Ukraine about 3 years ago. She is now enlisted in the armed forces of Ukraine as a medic and works as a medic somewhere in Ukraine. And she can talk about various aspects of what's going on in Ukraine on the ground from her various types of experiences that she had. So I'm going to start with Sasha. The way I'd like to do this is to give you each some time to speak out and say things that you need to say. and then we'll go to 1 or 2 questions for you to answer. So I'd like to start with Sasha. Welcome again.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the invitation.
One of the topics that is really important, I think, to us and here is the security of Ukraine. What can we do now in the current political situation, both in Europe and the United States, to ensure that Ukraine wins this war and retains its borders, retains its territory? I think that's the first step before we talk about anything in the future. And I know, Sasha, you've been very active in this area, and you talk to people everywhere about it. So if you could speak to about the current situation and let us know what you think we're looking at and facing.
Thank you so much, and thank you for saying Ukraine needs to win the war. Because so far, if you look at all of the media outlets, it says about stopping the war. Nobody's talking anymore about Ukraine winning. Everybody is talking about stopping this war. And this is basically what Putin wants, is to get as much as he wants and then to stop, to get him extra time to build just a bigger and stronger army to go ahead. You've probably seen the latest signing of the mineral deal agreement, and I think this is a really good step, especially that followed by the decision of DSA. This is a part of Pentagon that is selling weapons to sell Ukraine partially the needed components and trainings for the F-16 pilots. Because this is the first step, and I think this is what's going to be happening in the nearest future, is the United States more probably not just supporting by sending weapons, but selling weapons. And I think this is where the Europeans would have to stand up more, and I think they understand it, especially after the Munich Security Conference, which was, I believe, a wake-up call for a lot of people, because after Vice President JD's speech, I think it became obvious for a lot of the European leaders that there is no confidence that Americans are going to back up them in case something happens. And they understood that Ukraine is basically the last battlefield for them that they cannot lose. When we talk about security, Ukraine had been very clear, and this is a part of our constitution, about the NATO. We understand this is a very long term, but I do also believe that when the war is over, it's going to be NATO who is going to benefit from the Ukrainian, having Ukraine as a part of it, than more than Ukraine just having NATO. Because we are obviously one of the strongest armies in the world right now, and we can be teaching others how the new wars are fought. Because if we look at the battlefield right now, I can tell you honestly, the war 3 years ago and the war now is 2 different wars. If 3 years ago we were running around asking for, I don't know, big drones like Gray Eagles or Reapers, now we see that there are millions of drones flying over Ukraine, the FPV drones, which are $500, $600 per piece. And this is what the war looks like now. And it's changing rapidly. It's changing 24/7. And we are at the front lines of these changes. And actually, this is Ukrainians who are driving these changes in this war, because again, why it's the war of the FPV drones, of these small kamikaze drones, because once we ran out of the artillery shells, because the United States could not pass the legislation and the supplemental was stuck in Congress for 6 months. We did not have anything to shoot, so we started using drones instead of the artillery shells. And this is how the war was changed. If we talk about security, I honestly believe, and I think a lot of colleagues will agree to that, if Ukraine had all of the weapons we have now in February or even in April 2022, this war would be over already. Unfortunately, previous administration was very slow into providing weapons to Ukraine. It always took us 6 or sometimes even 18 months, like with the F-16 jets. to persuade them that those are critically needed at the front lines. And again, just to give you the numbers, the US Navy has 3,700 jets, so almost 4,000 jets. Ukraine has 20. And even with the 20 F-16 jets, we're managing to stop Russians and not destroy a lot of their airfields and their aircrafts. And I understand that if the United States makes a decision, if the politicians here make the decision for Ukraine to win, just providing enough weapons to not just to stop Russians, but to defeat Russians would be very easy. Because looking at the numbers, even 5 or 10% of the weapons that the United States have would be enough to put the Russians on the knees. Besides, besides just that, the United States has a lot of power over sanctions. And if you look at the last bill that was introduced by Lindsey Graham, who is one of the biggest advocates of Ukraine, literally one of those people who is telling President Trump that Ukraine needs to be backed up and Ukraine needs to be supported. And he introduced a great bill on sanctions that basically introduces secondary sanctions to everyone who is still trading with Russia. If this was done at least 2 years ago, Russia would be broke. Unfortunately, we still understand that the majority of the spare parts that we see now in the Russian drones and in the Russian missiles, they come from the European countries or the United States. And we're not even talking about China or India or other countries that are benefiting from this war and trading with Russia. But it's literally our partners who are on one side providing support to us, saying that Ukraine needs to win, and on the other side are still trading with Russia through dual-use trade and selling them goods that are literally taken apart, and the chips and all of the spare parts are being used for the army, for the Russian army to build their own capacity. So I do hope that after signing the mineral deal, and I do hope there will be more deals coming, like sharing the technologies and the defense technologies, because Ukraine can now be a polygon for a lot of the defense companies, American defense companies, European defense companies. And if there will be not only the mineral deal, but let's say the technology sharing deal or something like that, I think Ukraine one day can become a second Israel, just with the stronger and more crazier neighbor that will have to protect its sky 24/7, protect its borders, but it can definitely get it back and can be a strong European country.
Thank you, Sasha. Professor, I'd like to direct the same question to you, Professor Kuzio, and get your feedback on it. If you'd like me to repeat the question, I can.
I'm hoping that you can hear me, right?
Yes.
Right. No, I understand the question. I'll try to address it in a different way to Sasha, so that we get a kind of a different viewpoints. I mean, I think that it's wrong to believe that these issues with the United States began with Donald Trump. And I'll say this, for example, on the question of NATO. We should not be romantic. The last US president who has supported Ukraine's membership of NATO was President Bush. That's as far back as 2008. So we have a consensus in America amongst Democrats and Republicans against Ukrainian membership of NATO. In fact, I think Ukrainians now believe and now have a viewpoint that they've been betrayed and lied to about NATO membership. Because every NATO summit, annual summit since 2008 until last year, has said that NATO has an open door policy and Ukraine's future is in NATO. The next NATO summit in The Hague in 2 months' time will not have an open door policy and will not say Ukraine's future is in NATO. So what was Ukraine told in the last 17 years? Was it told a bunch of lies? Was it not told the truth? This has been a terrible policy on the part of NATO and the US, because it's offered membership without ever really believing it was going to implement it, which then antagonized Russia, which thought that Ukraine was going to join NATO. So it's actually Ukraine's had the worst of both worlds on this. I think on the question of what's going on with the war in Ukraine, my impression is that the current administration simply has no understanding of what the Russians keep referring to, which is the roots of the war. They keep referring to this concept that we need to get rid of the roots of the war. This is Russia's phrase. I don't think anybody in the Trump administration understands that. What does the roots of the war mean? It means that the Kremlin believes that Ukraine has no right to be Ukrainian. It can only be a little Russia resembling Lukashenko's Belarus, a kind of a Russian puppet state. Russia is demanding all sorts of things which are ignored by most Western policymakers, including the Trump team, which is basically getting rid of law. They actually demand that Ukraine cancels loads of laws on culture, education, memory politics, church, and other things. They want Ukraine to resemble Little Russia or like Lukashenko's Belarus. On the question of Crimea, this lack of understanding came out even more there. It's as though President Trump had no understanding of Ukraine's constitution or Ukraine's laws. He kind of believed that Zelensky could just say, yeah, okay, I agree, Crimea is now legally Russian, which if he had done so would lead to his impeachment. It would lead to the Constitutional Court ruling against him, and there would be a demand for a referendum to be held, because the Constitution says you have to hold a referendum to change Ukraine's borders. But of course, you can't hold a referendum under martial law. So the whole Crimea question's a non-question, as it were. And it makes you wonder, did nobody in the State Department understand this? Nobody in kind of Washington understand this kind of issue? I mean, no Ukrainian politician will agree to de jure legally recognize any bit of Ukrainian territory as Russian. De facto, well, that's reality. Now, on the question of victory, I'm afraid I'm going to have to disappoint you, because the US has a consistent policy on this. Back in 1990-91, I mean, many of you are too young to remember, but in 1990-91, President Bush was afraid of the USSR disintegrating. He came to Ukraine on the 1st of August 1991 and gave what was dubbed a Chicken Kyiv speech to the Ukrainian Parliament, because he feared that what would happen if the USSR disintegrated. The same thing today. The Biden administration and Trump fear Russia's defeat. So US policy has been, under both Biden and Trump, to give enough weapons to Ukraine for it to be not defeated, but never enough weapons for Ukraine to win a victory. And I'm afraid that this problem of what is the goal of Western support for Ukraine is still there. I mean, Europe now is going to be taking up most of the slack, which, because the United States is maybe not going to supply weapons to Ukraine. But what is the European goal? Have the Europeans come out openly and said, we are in favor of Russia's military defeat? Some countries have, Scandinavian, three Baltic states, of course, Britain, but not the EU, not Europe as a whole. And that needs to be said. You can't have a forever war. That would be disastrous for Ukraine. I've just come back from Kharkiv today, which is like 30, 40 kilometers from the border with Russia. And the city's at about 30% of its level of the pre-war period. I mean, and every day, and I heard it from my hotel room, you have 5, 6, 7 kind of air raid warnings. Just yesterday evening, 50 people were wounded or killed in bombing raids by Russia. This can't go on indefinitely. Why should Ukraine keep fighting when Europe and the West can't decide what is the final goal of this support for Ukraine? So I think that there's quite a lot of disappointment in Ukraine. I would say Ukrainians already feel that they were betrayed by the Budapest Memorandum of 1994 when they were pressured by the US to give up nuclear weapons, and then those security guarantees they were given were ignored in 2014 by both Britain and the United States. And now we have Bucharest, because in Bucharest in 2008, Ukraine was told, don't worry, your future is in NATO. But that seems to be not true anymore. So I'm not sure what Ukraine's security is still an open question. Ukraine is doing, I think, quite well on the battlefield, where Russia is not, as we heard from Sasha. But there's a whole other area to the war, which is civilian casualties, destruction of the country, the fact that the longer this war goes on, the less likely 6 million Ukrainians who fled abroad in 2022 will never come back. So I think there's still a lot of open questions of where this is going to go and what are the ultimate goals of the US and Europe. With the Trump administration, we simply don't know because they change their mind 3 times a day. But let's hope that things improve after the minerals deal with Ukraine. But I'm glad finally Europe is rising to the occasion, and Western Europe now has the same view of Russia as Central Eastern Europe and the Baltic states, where it's taken a while. Why did it take 2022 full-scale invasion? Why did Western Europe continue business with Russia after 2014? These are lots of historical questions. So I'll leave it at that for the time being. I think there's some very positive developments in Europe, but there's still a lot of big important questions that are not yet decided. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Kuzio. JP, would you like to go next, please, and take a look at that same question for you, maybe from your perspective on the ground as a journalist, and with certain opinions about the administrations that have tried to deal with the war in their own ways?
Indeed. And also, for my benefit, for the audience, would you please repeat the question so we can stay focused on it?
Yes. So we'd like to know your position on number one, Ukraine's path forward, given the current administration, current political situation, including a little bit of the background and history moving it forward, as far as retaining its borders, retaining its territory, and a victory, and also what you think will happen in the next, say, 6 to 12 months as far as the Europeans and the European position, now that it seems that the United States government has decided to abandon the issue. The most recent piece I read was that since nothing had occurred and since nothing had been finalized, they were going to abandon it for more important things.
Well, thank you for that, Ausra, and thanks to Taras and Sasha for your ideas. And I look forward to hearing Rima, of course, and Conrad. I'm still an optimist, even though I've been here reporting from Ukraine every single day for 3 years, more than 3 years, and I believe that I guess my bold idea is that with a few simple steps, I still believe we can get the White House and, by extension, America, fully on Ukraine's side. And this is what I work for every single day. I think we have to approach this like a real American political campaign, because that's how you win over the American people. And actually, if you look what Russian propaganda has been doing, Russian propaganda listens to the mood and the pain points of the Americans better than we are doing. And that's why Russia is able to be so persuasive. And I think with a few key changes, those of us who stand for Ukraine and Ukrainians really have an ability to turn this around. And I think actually, in the past weeks, we've seen some signs of hope from the White House. So as for some background, I reported every single day, every weekday. I never took a day off from February 2022 until last Christmas on Chicago WGN Radio, 10 minutes a day, live from Ukraine. We kept the third biggest city in America engaged on this country when everyone else thought, oh, people are getting bored about Ukraine. And I realized, no, people were bored with the way the story was told. And so I fought every single day to tell the story in a captivating way. And it became one of the most popular segments on Chicago radio, Chicago media. Inexplicably, after Trump was elected and right before Christmas, it was canceled by the executives. And then I've since now I have a new perch, which might sound a bit bizarre to some of you, but Elon Musk has started a new program, a news program on X called 69X Minutes. He was angry at 60 Minutes, and so he created 69X Minutes. And I have had a weekly Ukraine report every Sunday or Monday for the past month and a half. I have a chance, I will speak to any audience that will listen. And I have a chance now, not every day like I used to with Chicago, but this is a much bigger audience. It reaches millions of people, but also it reaches the people in the White House. And so every week now, if you follow me at JP Lindsay on X, you can see these reports with this show that is sort of boosted and funded by Elon. I do it for free. I don't like to take money from anyone to keep my journalistic independence. Now, I think my approach here is, as an American, as someone who used to work for the founder and chairman of Fox News, I quit that job and I escaped, but he was someone very much like Donald Trump, especially in this respect. He knew how to read the mood of the American people and to use it in the ways that he wished, for good or for ill. And so having that experience and knowing a lot of people in the White House, I keenly pay attention to what is being said in the U.S., what are the trends and what are the moods? And I think we all have to consider, why are we all talking about America? Because we know that we need America. If this is going to work in a good way, I mean, there was a little bit of optimism after the Trump-Zelensky White House kerfuffle that Europe would stand up. But now I think we all realize it's not going to happen as quickly as everyone was hoping. And we do need America. And this is why I know it's necessary, but I think we actually have a chance to win over America. And I think, if you talk to MAGA people, you might think that they hate Ukraine. But if you press them and you ask them a few more questions, and I know this because Ukrainian soldier musicians were traveling America last October, and they went through the Deep South and to Texas, and where Sasha lives sometimes, and they really engaged people. And they saw that once they started to talk to people, the anger was not really toward Ukraine; it was toward Washington. And so this is, if Ukraine can separate itself from Washington, from the Washington corruption, there's a chance. And I think, and as long as Americans and actually including many people in the White House, as long as they associate Ukraine with Joe Biden, Ukraine with the forever war machine, they're not going to be interested in it in a deep way. And because of this, they lack a lot of Taras was mentioning, and Sasha too. I mean, all the information that the White House seems to be unaware of about Ukraine. I mean, I know this, like even senior officials do not know about Ukraine's successes in the Black Sea. We see Pete Hegseth, Secretary of Defense, talking about, our Navy's not ready to face China. We have to do things about it. And I follow that chatter closely. They're totally unaware. They never talk about, and they're not aware of what Ukrainian sea drones have done to the Russian Navy in the Black Sea, and now to Russian Air Force, as we saw in the past 24 hours. And what from my understanding, we can argue all we want. We can try to get louder about these points. They're never going to listen as long as they associate Ukraine with everything that MAGA hates. And namely, that is the previous regimes. That's including Lindsey Graham, Sasha. I have to say, like, every time Lindsey Graham speaks out very forcefully in favor of Ukraine, that really hurts right now in this moment because MAGA doesn't like him because he was a big supporter of the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. And so we have to really keenly recognize the pain points for Americans, which, again, Russians do very well. And I think, this can be led in many ways by President Zelensky, I want to point out a story. I think it came out today in the Times of London by Larissa Brown. It echoes what Taras was just saying, but an ex-senior CIA official revealed that Joe Biden gave Ukraine just enough weapons to bleed, but not enough to win. That was the headline of the Times of London today. And if you think about that, as I listen to what Donald Trump says about Ukraine, my perception is that the Ukraine that he sees, the Ukraine that is in his mind, is a Ukraine that was restricted by Joe Biden. It's not real Ukraine. It's a version of Ukraine that he thinks is weak, that cannot win. But as we all know, that there were so many times the past 3 years when Ukraine was stopped, when Ukraine had a moment to seize the advantage and was curtailed. Taras, you mentioned that city of Kharkiv, and yeah, it's not what it was before the war. But one reason why I like to report from Kharkiv all the time, because that city, 30 miles from Russia, has lower crime than Chicago, Los Angeles. There are a lot of people still there. There are people opening businesses, wonderful parks, kids go to school. It is a sign that this can work. And those stories, no one hears them in the White House or in Washington. And one way to change these optics is if, and I think that the simplest way, we can all participate in this, but the simplest way would be, for example, if President Zelensky said to Donald Trump, Joe Biden restricted us, he hurt us. And moreover, as my reporting has, helped try to bring to the forefront, Biden's family made money from the Kremlin. That company, Burisma, MAGA hates Ukraine because they think Burisma was Ukrainian. But actually, Burisma was part of the Yanukovych regime that the Ukrainian people kicked out of their country. It was a pro-Russian corruption. And it was only when Burisma CEO had fled to Moscow that he hired Hunter Biden's son. So there's actually clear evidence that the Bidens were being paid by pro-Russian, anti-Ukrainian interests. And all that has to be done is to give that to Trump. And a lot of people think this sounds ridiculous, but America is an old Western movie. And Donald Trump, again, I'm not offering any opinion on if this is good or this is bad. I'm just saying what it is. He's fixated, as is much of MAGA, on addressing the corruption as they perceive it of the past. On Easter Sunday, not only on Donald Trump's social media post, he said, "Christ is risen, and we're coming after Joe Biden." And from the pro-Ukraine perspective, I see there's an easy knockdown argument that Zelensky can make, is saying, yeah, you know what? Joe Biden really hurt us. And even the Times of London defense editor has a story about this today. Ex-CIA people are talking about this. And so I think if we could begin to pinpoint these specific ways in which Biden restricted Ukraine and focus on the fact that he did have money, his family had money coming from Russia, we can begin to change the optics. And I would encourage everyone to, and as I try to encourage people in Ukraine, look at which foreign leaders are the most well-received in the Oval Office. And it's very painful as I see this, because I see Conor McGregor, who's, he's not a foreign leader, but a personality of Ireland, well-received almost as a head of state. You see the president of El Salvador, tiny El Salvador, which I think in a previous administration, Donald Trump would have called by a different name, that country, beginning with an S and ending with whole. But now the president of El Salvador is received and welcomed in the White House. And why is this? Because he's giving Trump both the optics and sort of the material, something that he wants, that MAGA wants. And I think, when we think of Trump, I know it's hard for a lot of Europeans to see it this way. Trump is the voice of the people who voted for him. That's how they think and how they talk. And this is why when Zelensky was in the Oval Office, Trump let J.D. Vance go after Zelensky, because J.D. Vance was speaking the voice of MAGA. Trump is actually a bit more reasonable on those foreign policy points. And so we have to realize that we're not only talking to Trump, we're talking to MAGA. And if President Zelensky could give something to Trump, which is totally accurate, saying, hey, look, Joe Biden actually hurt us, that is all Trump needs. It's not very much. And in closing, I'll point out in another story in the British media today, in the Daily Telegraph, President Zelensky was talking about how the meeting at the Vatican, which had wonderful optics, was so much better than the meeting at the White House several months ago. And President Zelensky said that was a turning point. But here are his words. Zelensky said, "I'm confident that after our meeting in the Vatican, President Trump began to look at things a little differently. We'll see. That's his vision, his choice in any case. And my contention is that was the wrong thing to say. That actually makes Americans less likely to like you, which if we want American weapons, we have to appeal to them. And I think if President Zelensky had said, we both found a new mutual understanding, and if Zelensky said, now I'm starting to see why Americans have been skeptical. It's because they think this is a forever war, but that's not what we want. That's what Russia wants. And if we can begin to appeal to what Americans actually care about, and MAGA in particular, then you can have a great chance to turn around the optics. And so that is my my daily focus, is to help people in Kyiv understand what is the mood in America and how to understand it and how to meet it and reach it. Because at the point when we're going to scream and shout from the rooftops, that means all hope is lost. And I do not think we're there yet. I mean, as we've seen with the minerals deal, we've also seen in the past couple of days, Trump is no longer demanding, the removal of Zelensky. We are starting to see progress, and it's up to all of us not to, to be negative about that, to sort of give oxygen to this little flicker of hope. But mainly, my contention, which I know is controversial, the pièce de résistance is simply to say, look, Joe Biden and the Democrats and corrupt Republicans, going back to George H.W. Bush, every time Ukraine got more freedom, they took away Ukraine's weapons. And just imagine if Zelensky said this in his next meeting with Trump. I know why the American people are mad. Same reason why the Ukrainian people are mad. The old way of doing things in Washington. Washington lied to the American people. They lied about Iraq, everything else. And they've also lied to the Ukrainians. And if you say that, then you can begin to win over the American people. And I think that's the only way. But I think we actually, it is something that is achievable.
Thank you, JP. We're going to go ahead with Rima. She has
I think we lost her.
soldiers and so on, with medical care and just anything else they may need. So Rima, if you want to go ahead.
Okay. Do me a favor and just repeat the question one more time for me so I can specifically answer it.
Yes, sure. So basically, we want to take a look at Ukraine's future, at its its future in whether or not its victory, its retainment of territorial integrity of its borders, and especially in the environment of the current political situation in the United States and in Europe. If you can speak to that and just what is needed and your own personal experiences about the front line and what's going on the ground and the morale there.
Okay. Well, I'm going to be super blunt right now, and this weird Pollyanna outlook on certain things needs to be thrown in the trash. Okay. I think, number one, we are seeing a lot of hostile attitudes from Washington. Every other day, there's another hostile post from Donald Trump. I don't know how to approach that in a diplomatic manner. I don't know how governments can approach another government that are acting this way. It seems pretty clear to me, maybe I'm reading different tweets, that there really isn't much support from this administration for Ukraine. And that is something that is more noticeable in my eyes. I believe that it's going to be Europe that's going to have to be our village that it's going to take to help win this war. I do agree with Professor Kuzio that we have to say that Russia's defeat needs to be what we say. And it's not about ending the war or ending the conflict as opposed to Ukraine winning. We're using the wrong language. And I also dislike when anybody uses the word conflict. It's not a conflict. Russia illegally invaded Ukraine. No disputes. Whatever Washington may try to say, no disputes. Okay. And it's hard when you're on the ground and you have consistent questions from the Ukrainians that are around you and everybody, and they're like, well, you're American. What's going on? And I can't answer that because I don't know. And I do agree with the point that the previous administration was exceptionally slow in delivering aid, weapons, etc. Whatever their reasons were, if that was to make sure that, Ukraine bled but didn't die, great. They were too slow, and this current administration isn't giving anything until we sign a deal that says, okay, well, in exchange for minerals, now you can have weapons so that, you don't completely fall apart. Doesn't seem very fair to me, at least from where I stand on the ground, where we try to repair the damage that Russia does to Ukrainian soldiers every day, including gassing, FPV drones, and all kinds of other horrific ways to hurt and maim and kill people. And it's not just soldiers, it's also civilians. So I think I am not trying to say that we count America out completely, but I think that the attitude needs to be America's not coming. It's up to us / Europe to try and defeat Russia, in my opinion. I also personally find it really hard to wrap my head around the idea as an American that we have to sell the idea of supporting freedom and democracy to the American people as a political campaign. That bothers me because these are core American values that we should not have to sell like a TV special. Hey, for $19.99, you can help this country retain their freedom and democracy and their natural borders that they've had since 1991. It bothers me. I don't like it. The way forward is, again, we're going to have to do it with Europe, and we just keep pushing forward. Forward is the only way. We can't just stop because the U.S. decided they don't want to help us, or I should say the U.S. administration. There are millions of American people that support Ukraine every day. I'm talking to some of them right now. We appreciate you. We appreciate your support. Please don't stop talking about Ukraine. Okay? Make sure you keep telling everybody. Maybe that was from that small microcosm of MAGA supporters that were angry at the previous administration over being angry at Ukraine, but that's not what I see on comments, on polls, on other things on the internet. There's a lot of hatred towards Ukraine. There's constant accusations of Ukraine being Nazis. Also, what is the word I'm looking for? Persecuting Christians. All kinds of Russian propaganda that seeps through. And there's really no way of convincing people otherwise. And maybe it seems like, there's certain signs that show that the administration is starting to become more receptive to Zelensky and Ukraine. I'm not seeing it. What I do see is weird photos that are posted by the White House administration of Trump as the Pope. I'm not seeing it. So again, I still think that Ukraine should not give up any of its territory. As the professor said, there's no way that any Ukrainian is going to be okay with giving up anything. And I don't think it should either. It's like saying that the US should give up Alaska back to Russia because it used to belong to Russia at one time. The US isn't going to do that. So from that's that perspective. I hope I answered that as well as I could. A little tired. Sorry, guys.
Oh, that's okay. I know that you had several shifts, so we understand. Conrad, do we want to do questions from no questions from the audience? Okay, then why don't we start with Sasha and just rebut or comment on what the other panelists have said. We can start with Sasha and maybe follow with Taras and everyone else. Is Sasha still there? Hello?
Yes, I am.
There she is.
Okay.
Hi, Maria.
And I have support here.
So, ladies and gentlemen, together with Sasha is a person I know well. She supports every single Baltic event we have. She's sometimes the only one there, but she comes with her flag and she stands with us. And I really appreciate that because it's working together that helps. All the way back to 1990-91 when Lithuanians were demonstrating in the streets Ukrainians came, brought their flags, and stood with us. I was there, so I can tell you that I saw it myself. And Maria is a doctor. She heads up the Illinois Umana division. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Thank you. Thank you.
Ukrainian Medical Association of North America. So welcome, Maria. Thank you for stopping by. And let's start with Sasha.
Yes, I just wanted to thank everyone for their remarks. And I think we all agree that, first of all, this war could have been over and Ukraine could have already won if, I'm so sorry, but I completely agree with what Joe was saying, if Biden moved faster. If he wasn't scared to provide enough weapons at the time when they were needed. Because every time we received weapons, it was 6 months later, and it was not in the quantities we needed. And now we have this nightmare called Biden war. And I do believe that the only way for us to win and to get actually the support, because we can pretend that it will be Ukrainian and Europeans fighting. I can tell you, if the United States, if you remember about a month ago when the weapons delivery was shut down and the intel sharing, it was not the complete shutdown of the intel sharing, but we were hurt a lot. Yeah. If we do that again, if they do decide to put us on the knees, the United States can do that. So we can pretend that it will be Ukrainians and Europeans fighting. No, we cannot make it without the United States. And second, unfortunately, the Europeans woke up, especially the big leaders, only at the Munich Security Conference. Because we have been telling everyone, ramp up the production. You have to be independent. They realized it only now that Uncle Sam might not be coming to support them. And I'm so sorry, but there is no European air defense system that can put down the ballistic. Only the American can. So we can pretend that we can be fighting with SAM-T, IRIS-T, but at the end, Kyiv will be totally destroyed with the ballistic missiles if the Americans stop delivering those or stop selling those. And second, every piece of the European weapon has American spare parts in it. If the United States decide to shut down the third-party transfer and will not let the Europeans give us certain types of weapons, we're done. So I do believe we need to find the solution in these trade agreements, in these mineral deal agreements and other agreements to show that Ukraine is of an interest to the United States. Because otherwise, this administration will never support that, because they have a totally different view. Especially if you look at the MAGA side. So unless we do prove that Ukraine is needed for the United States, not only as, a banana republic to have minerals from, but also to show the world that it's not about making America great again. It's literally about showing that America is still the #1 country in the world, because otherwise, if Ukraine goes down, that's it. China, Taiwan, and we can name whatever you want next.
Sasha's making a great point. Sorry, really quick. Sasha's making a great point, because what she's trying to say is we have to answer the question to the United States for them asking what's in it for us, and how do we frame it as Ukraine being the what's in it for us answer.
Thank you.
Well, and I agree. I think one thing that Ukraine has done that has not been evident before in the political scheme of things is shown that the interdependence that seemed to be so good and so positive is actually detrimental when a country decides that maybe what you're doing with their weapons is something they don't like. So let's assume that that the United States was allied with Russia, that means that every single weapon system that the Europeans have that has some parts from the United States or is from the United States cannot be used in a war against Russia. So what's the use of having it? So maybe it also has shown a way, unrelated to the question, but to become independent of the United States and maybe of other providers like Switzerland in the parts that one buys. It means you have to do things within your own borders, but that's something to look at in the future.
Switzerland is stuck. I can tell you we had a great experience when we received, oh my gosh, one of the like small short-range air defense systems, old ones, Gepards from Germany. And the only production of the missiles for those were in Switzerland. Guess what? They just shut down the third-party transfer because Germany could not even buy from Switzerland for their own Gepards, and they just moved the production. And this is what's going to be happening because they do understand that this is their independency and this is their safety.
Yep. Anyone else?
Thank you, panel, for coming in and from all over the world. We thank you for your insight and everything else that's happening in Ukraine. My favorite phrase that I've learned in the past 3 years is "Razum do peremoi." So thank you. Thank you for.
If I could say, I want to say, Conrad, thanks to all for hosting this, and Rima, because in your talk it was missed, but the work you do every day, rescuing, healing and helping those who've been wounded in battle is extraordinary. I followed you for these past 3 years, and so thank you for that. And that's, that's where my goal. Once we can get Washington to wake up a bit, when they know that Americans like you are here, I think that will begin to really transform the optics. And I would just, Sasha, following up quickly on you, I would encourage, Americans, especially those who voted for Trump, Republicans and Democrats, they were so burned by Iraq and Afghanistan, by being lied to by George W. Like, that is a wound and a trauma in America. And if we can understand that and show that this is different, we have a good chance. And so that's what I'll continue to do. And Rima, I agree. I don't think it should be this way, but this is the reality as I see it, and I'm going to meet it and face it and try to persuade people to understanding their pain to be on our side.
I'm just disgruntled because I see a lot every day, so that's all. But yeah, I know, Conrad, we always got to wrap it up. I get it. We lost some time with the other speech, but I thank you, JP. We see a lot here in the Stab Point every day, and so it's hard not to be passionate because nobody wants to see what we see, and we're there for the soldiers on the worst day of their lives. And sometimes that's really, it just kind of hits you right here and you get angry and that anger doesn't always go away. So anyway, but thank you.
Thank you all.
Conrad?
Yep.
Conrad?
Yes.
Conrad, can I make one very short statement to Sasha? I think because she's the best person. In vein of what everyone has said, United 24 features often a lot of different soldiers speaking about their experience in Ukraine. I think they've had 1 or 2 Americans. I think that maybe we could take more Americans, especially those that have served in previous wars, have been disappointed by what happened and feel that they're doing something good in Ukraine. Maybe feature some of them in the United 24 reels that people do watch, as they talk about what fighting in Ukraine means to them, whether it's vis-a-vis previous experiences or just Ukraine, because I've dealt with a lot of soldiers that have said that it's very important for them to be fighting for democracy and freedom. So that was just my last comment.